Welcome to the Jeremy Mullins podcast, where we take a deep dive into different educational topics to help you optimize your life. I am Jeremy. I'm your host. I'm a registered dietitian, strength coach, along with a professor in nutrition at the collegiate level, and I will be your host. Here in season 2, I hope to bring you more series on education, whether this be looking at research topics, research papers as far as position papers, whether it be books, whether it be textbooks, or in today's case, we are going to do the nutritional readiness chapter inside of the FM-22 holistic health and fitness, which is for us that are in the Army, kind of the doctrine when it comes to H2F. And when I was reading through a lot of the stuff in the nutrition chapter, there's some great information. There is some good information inside there that can help soldiers and help individuals, live a healthier life when it comes to nutrition. But I also looked at it, there was a lot of absolutes, right? So when you're reading doctrine and you're reading books, a lot of times you will read something as an absolute and not with having experience, take it for face value. Okay. And what I thought would be an awesome series to do is to take stuff from my experience and give you that information along with what the reading says. So I hope these series you'll find value in them. I hope you find education in them. And for those that were asking for that second layer of education on the podcast, I hope this fills that gap for you. Because once again, my goal with the podcast is to provide education, to the listeners that you want to hear, right? So hope you're out enjoying your walk, maybe enjoying a ride to work, wherever you listen to the podcast, and we will get started here on nutritional readiness. The way I'll flow with this, I'll read it verbatim out of the context, and then I will give you my opinion, my take on it, and then hopefully that can enlighten, certain situations. Okay. So nutritional readiness. The demands imposed by the Army training, combat, and continuous operations are unique and challenging. Nutritional readiness is animate of an individual when it comes to a nutritional strategy that supports optimal physical and cognitive function, as well as lifelong disease and injury prevention. So a couple of things I want to pull out of that. Remember, when we look at nutrition, yes, a lot of times we think fat loss, we think muscle gain, but the cognitive standpoint, and a lot of you guys may be feeling this coming off the holidays. Maybe you ate a little bit more simple sugars than usual, have a little bit of that brain fog, not as on point as you'd be usually mentally. So that can be a cognitive standpoint, right? And the other thing there is lifelong disease. You're going to hear me harp a lot of that through my education. Ultimate goal when I work with people is to live a longer, healthier life. And nutrition, of course, plays a role in that. Continuing on with text. Nutritional readiness is a critical component of holistic health and contributes greatly to the mission's success. The development of a comprehensive performance nutrition program tailored to the organizational requirements can improve the individual soldier's performance, overall unit readiness, and mission success. In this chapter, it's going to describe the basic concepts of nutrition and integrate into the performance nutritional plans and practical nutrition recommendations for the soldier. Okay. Now, once again, understand that a lot of you guys are not military, but, just reading this verbatim and then, taking the education and implementing it for you. Now, we could argue that, hey, you don't have to be in the military. You don't have to be a first responder to get your nutrition on point to reap benefits from it. Okay. Foundation nutrition. The Army's comprehensive performance nutrition program concept and framework encompasses 3 components: proactive, active, and reactive. The proactive component or foundations nutrition entails chronic disease prevention, immune system enhancement. The active component or operational would be environmental task specific performance. Nutrition focused on events fueling, post event recovery, and of course, environmental. Okay. And the way you can think of that, outside of the military is, a lot of people don't make changes in their nutrition program until you have a disease, until you're diagnosed with high blood pressure, diagnosed with diabetes, that type of stuff, right? And when we look at foundation nutrition, this should just be the way we eat to live a healthy life. And I call this a lot of times in my education, we have our baseline nutrition, and then we'll have our fueling nutrition. So if you're trying to lose body fat, we may have a set number of calories, a set number of protein in order to create that caloric deficit for you to lose weight. But now we're training for a half Ironman. I need to fuel those longer training events. So you'll have additional fuel, primary carbohydrate, for your training on top of your baseline. So that's a great way to think there as, the proactive and the active nutrition component. Now, the reactive component we're getting ready to go into would be like more like nutrition therapy. Okay, you're diagnosed as a diabetic, so we need to do a specific diet plan to help control blood glucose levels. Have high blood pressure, more of a clinical setting, something like congestive heart failure, etc. Okay, so the reactive component or therapeutic nutrition centers around the specific nutritional interventions to treat an illness, injury, or condition. Okay. So I think that's pretty straightforward in how we're looking at that, just different terminology. And the way that, I would have the listeners think of it is we have our baseline nutrition for whatever our goal is, whether that goal is to maintain, to lose body fat, or gain muscle tissue. Then we might have certain ways that we fuel training for performance, right? And unfortunately, though, a lot of people come into that, wanting to live a healthier lifestyle more in a reactive phase. Okay, you've been diagnosed with a disease, you are 100 pounds overweight, so you're reacting to what needs to go on. And that's why going back to what I said in the beginning, there is no one size fits all when it comes to a nutrition program. All right. For a soldier to perform optimally throughout their careers in assignments with various levels of mental and physical requirements, they must be proactive and place much emphasis on nutritional health as they do task-specific performance. This entails chronic disease prevention and immune system enhancement. Nutrition is very important for our health. That's a big takeaway there. All right. Moving on, health promotion and chronic disease prevention. The nutritional foundation established by soldiers using dietary intake or everyday diet can greatly reduce preventable future disease. More than 60 years of peer-reviewed research has demonstrated the importance of everyday diet to health and living a longer, productive life. Okay, we got that. We understand that. And I think a lot of people know this, like we should eat healthier, right? We should eat more produce, more fruits and veggies. We should eat more lean meats. We shouldn't eat a lot of processed food. We shouldn't eat a lot of fast food. I think the basics everyone knows at heart, right? And this is just kind of saying, all right, we look at that. This is what we need to do to live that longer, healthier life. Soldiers can emphasize on these findings by consuming more whole grains, fruits, veggies, legumes, nuts, seeds, dairy products, fish, and less processed grains, added sugar, and processed meats. I don't care who you are, dietitian, personal trainer, and this is what I always talk about. And a lot of times diets get in these arguments. Well, this diet's better than that diet. This diet's better than that diet, and goes on and on. I think we can all agree that eating more whole foods and less processed foods is a great place to start. No matter if you're 100% plant-based, if you're low carb, high carb, it doesn't matter. If we cut out the processed foods in our nutrition plan and we eat more whole foods, we're in a good spot. Okay. Now, once again, some of the stuff that I like to educate on is, making sure that we're consuming that primary protein source at each meal and each snack, and then having produce at most meals and snacks. So having your primary protein source along with a fruit and veggie is a great habit to be or to implement into your nutrition plan. So now we're going into dietary guidelines. The U.S. State Department of Health and Human Services and the United States Department of Agriculture, also known as the USDA, jointly publish the dietary guidelines for Americans every 5 years. The dietary guidelines for Americans provide evidence-based food and beverage recommendations ages 2 to adult. These recommendations aim to promote health, prevent chronic disease, and to help people reach and maintain a healthy weight, and should be used to develop the soldier's baseline healthy pattern. Okay. An eating pattern represents all foods and beverages consumed. I think that's that's the definition of what I would say a diet, even though I think the mainstream, when you hear diet, it means something restrictive, right? But if you look at it and going back to some of the terminology that I educate and have talked to before, your baseline nutrition is an eating pattern that represents all foods and beverages consumed. This is why I am a macro-based coach, because it covers every quote unquote diet that is out there, because all foods are protein, carbs, and fats, or a combination of protein, carbs, and fats. All foods consumed as part of the healthy eating pattern unite to meet a nutritional need that promote a healthy weight, enhance performance, and prevent chronic disease. Soldiers aim to meet their nutritional needs through healthy eating patterns. Next page. Comprised of primary nutrient dense, carbohydrate or complex carbohydrate, lean meats, and healthy fats, and whole foods. A healthy eating pattern include the following: a variety of vegetables, from all different colors, fruits, especially whole fruit, So that always combines in, because remember back to your, and I'm dating myself now, like I was a food guide pyramid, learning in school. Now it's my plate. But a lot of times, for example, a juice can be substituted for a serving of fruit. So here, especially, they put whole fruit because we want fruit to be whole fruit versus a juice, from that aspect. But a juice can count as a serving. So just get in the weeds a little bit there, but do a little bit of definition. Whole grains, and then low-fat dairy products. Now, one thing I would like to mention here with low-fat dairy products, you don't always have to get low-fat dairy products unless you're trying to save some calories. Remember, a good rule of thumb is if it's a dairy product or it's an animal product in general, this is where you want to look for grass-fed, organic options, because when you start looking at the data, it's not necessarily the fat that causes the issues that has been associated with red meats or with animal products. It's what the animals have been fed, and then that changes the nutritional value of the fat where we store some of these nutrients. So a good rule of thumb when it comes to dairy products and animal products respectively, this is where you do want to look for USDA organic or grass-fed products to have a healthier choice. And then we can come on down to the last two bullet points: a variety of protein foods, including seafood, lean meats, poultry, eggs. They have legumes in here. Remember, legumes are a great source of protein, but they're a primary carbohydrate. So you do get protein from legumes, but they're going to be higher in carbohydrate than they are protein. So that's the reason I don't put them as a primary protein source. And then last, oils high in polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, we do want to consume a lot of. All right. So pretty straightforward with what we've kind of been teaching. If you've been around, that I've been teaching for years, more whole foods, less of the processed foods, looking at, spending more money for the higher quality animal products and dairy products. All right. And healthy eating pattern. A healthy eating pattern limits added sugar, saturated and trans fats, and sodium. I do have a couple of, issues with this. So when it goes to saturated fat, remember with the saturated fat, that's going to include all things, animal product based, but also coconut oil or even coconuts. And this is where the data is a little bit different. I don't necessarily have my clients limit saturated fat unless it is coming from the processed foods. Okay. So if you're doing grass-fed product, you're doing organic, full, fat dairy, it is okay to have some saturated fat inside of your diet. If you're doing coconut oil to cook with, or you're doing coconut, just as a product that you like to consume, then those saturated fats are okay. It is the saturated fats that's going to be found in our simple processed foods that we want to stay away from. And then also the sodium. The recommendation here is to consume less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. And I think if you're active and you have no health complications, that we shouldn't restrict our sodium. Okay. A normal sodium intake is going to be more probably that, 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams a day, because we're losing these electrolytes, including sodium, inside of our training. And we want to make sure that we're replacing that. So that's something to take in consideration with some of these general recommendations, that it's made for the general public. And unfortunately, we look at our general public, guys, we're still, 60-70% of adults are overweight, right? 3 or a third of our society has diabetes. So the general statements is for that. And once again, this is why I want to do these series for you, is to kind of read it and then educate it, from my perspective, in my opinion. All right. We're going to do one more section here and we'll wrap up, the first part of this series when it comes to the nutritional readiness. Importance of calorie balance within a healthy eating pattern. So managing caloric intake is a fundamental to achieving and maintain calorie balance. The balance between calories taken in of foods and the calories expended from metabolic process and physical activity. That is the key, guys. When we're talking about weight management, it is always going to be calories. And once again, protein comes right there with it, because our goal when we're trying to lose weight is not to lose weight. It's to lose body fat. And by having optimal levels of protein along with optimal caloric load, that is when we drop body fat and maintain that lean muscle inside of that caloric deficit. Okay. So calories do matter. They'll always matter, but so does protein. And that's the reason we do hang our hat on protein and calories when it comes to a lot of the education that I pump out, a lot of the ways that we manage people inside of the app in our coaching program. Okay. Key components of healthy eating pattern. All foods and beverages contain calories. A total number of calories varies depending on macronutrients. On average, carbohydrates, proteins contain 4 calories per gram, and fats have 9. and alcohol has 7. So that's just our basic, when it comes to macros and calories that are in those, 4, 4, 9, and 7 respectively. Okay. Now you do have, going down the weeds, you could look at sugar alcohols that have almost 3, fiber has 2. So there's some stuff like that. Ketones having some calories, but once again, those are just, some sidebar conversation I want to throw out there in this conversation. The total number of calories a person needs each day varies, including the person's age, sex, height, weight, and level of physical activity. A need to lose, maintain, gain, and other factors. So basically your goals, how much muscle tissue you have, how much body fat tissue, because height and weight, height, generally, if you're taller, right, you have more body surface, therefore you may have more muscle tissue. But height alone, if I am the same muscle tissue and the same body fat as someone who's 6 foot tall versus me being 5'9", our caloric burn is going to be the same. Height isn't going to matter if I have the same amount of tissue as that individual. Okay. So that's where I disagree a little bit with some of that in there, but it is just noted that, hey, the amount of calories that we burn does vary based on different factors, goals included. Okay. Eat a variety of vegetables that meet following requirement. Recommended intake: veggies from all subgroups, right? Dark green, red, orange, legumes, and then include fresh, frozen, canned, and dried options in cooked or raw form, including vegetable juices. So don't get too caught up in, your veggies, whether they're canned, frozen. You're not going to lose that much nutrition value. The key is to eat them. I know probably maybe a decade and a half ago, there was a big push that, canned veggies, canned fruit, that type of stuff that we shouldn't do, but don't worry about the nutritional loss on how, they are preserved. Okay. They are still a high nutritional value, no matter how they're packaged and how they're served. I guess, unless you're deep frying them. So they got to be the way they're served, right? So don't deep fry your veggies. Key nutrients: vegetables are important sources of many of your nutrients, including dietary fiber, potassium, vitamin A, C, K, copper, magnesium, vitamin E and B, folate, iron, niacin, choline. Each vegetable subgroup contains different combinations of nutrients. Okay, so eat a variety of veggies, eat a variety of fruit is kind of that takeaway there. Okay. Consideration: soldiers consuming vegetables with limited additions such as salt, butter, and creamy sauces. When selecting frozen or canned, choose from a lower sodium at each meal. Strive to make half your plate fruits and veggies. I like the strive to have your half your plate fruits and veggies. Once again, I'm not too worried about, if you're exercising and training, of not salting your food. Okay. Or if you have the calories in your diet, nothing wrong with putting some grass-fed butter on your veggies. Should you be aware of that for total calories? 100%. But, once again, I'm just reading this statement, right? And if we read this verbatim, then someone will be like, man, I can't put any butter, I can't put any salt in our veggies. And that's just not true. It is a generic quote statement. And once again, this is why we're doing this series. All right. Eat the fruits that meet following requirements. So once again, the fruit group includes whole fruits and 100% fruit juice. Just once again, be careful with your 100% fruit juices. You just wouldn't want to drink them all the time because it could still run your total calories up. Maybe do those fruit juices with combination of a protein and a veggie, or during activity is where I would say do your fruit juices. Okay. Something to note here, and I highlighted this: similar to juice, when consumed in excess, dried fruits can contribute to extra calories. So nothing wrong with having dried fruits. Just watch your volume, because a lot of times you can eat a lot of those, in a small amount. All right. Key nutrients that are coming from our fruits, of course, dietary fiber, potassium, vitamin C, and eat a variety again. Okay. So, try to eat different sources of fruit. Try to do seasonal if you can. Once again, that's kind of second layer, but if you can get seasonal fruit or fruit from a certain season, if they're being imported in, that's always a good way to look at it. Local fruit, if possible. All right. And considerations at every meal: try to strive to make half of your plate fruits and veggies. Once again, that kind of goes with, the education I like to talk about, with we shoot for a primary protein source, to be consumed at each meal or snack, along with produce. And remember, just some basic education on our primary protein sources: meat. So any of your meats, your fish, your eggs, some dairy like cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, and protein shakes. Those are your primary protein sources. Make sure you're consuming those at each meal and each snack. striving for that 1 gram of protein per target body weight per day as a minimum. That's some general recommendations. So hope you guys have enjoyed part 1 of the nutritional readiness. We'll be working on part 2 and the remaining part of this chapter as I go through. I think I have 8 or 10 total chapters in this book. So I hope you enjoy the series, and I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you soon.